the bears didn't really sleep this year. They didn't hibernate.
Because it wasn't cold
It
enough?
wasn't cold enough. Yeah. They kind of well, hey, we're
Hey
live.
guys.
Hey, hello.
Enough about bears. Let's talk about something. Let's do something
Let's
less
talk about
boring.
Beats and Battlestar Galactica instead.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. Laptops.
Laptops. So basically, what we're doing today is, I say first off, thank you for joining us again today. It's Monday, and we're talking about laptops. One of the things that we find is that we have a lot of questions about what to buy, what to use, and now obviously the situation that people work from home remotely, people are needing new equipment and that sort of thing. So what we wanted to do is kind of put together a quick guide and some guidance and some ideas of like different laptops or different budgets.
Yeah, and we talked. I was gonna say we talked a little bit in an earlier stream about like when everyone's working from home. We did it a lot in our working, helping your kids work from home. That a lot of people now need more laptops. Like we have this many devices and this many people who need to work from home. So we want to. One of the reasons we're doing the budget is if you just need one in a pinch for your kids. But we're also going to talk like, hey, now's the time you're going to buy a new laptop if you want to invest. We have a couple of recommendations. So. Yeah, but you can check out our earlier streams on our YouTube channel if you want to see it there. And you can see some of those earlier ones as well.
Cool. Yeah, and so basically we broke it down into just different buckets of cost. So sub 500, 500, 1200, and then 1200 and above based on that. So with that, I'm going to say jump right in and let's go.
Yeah.
Miriam, you kick it off with the budget.
Actually, you know what? There was one thing. We're only talking laptops today. Some people can get away with their schoolwork or work on other things, depending on what you need it for. But we're going to talk about that next Monday. So next Monday, all about devices. We don't have a snappy title yet, but tune in then if you are like, maybe a laptop's not for me. We'll talk about that sort of thing.
Maybe a tablet, maybe a Chromebook, maybe something else. But yeah, today just laptops.
I wrote tablets, laptops, desktops. Oh my!
Yeah,
that's my pitch for the snappy title. We'll see.
You know what? I second that because that's what I posted on Facebook too. So we got it. There we go.
Yep. Cool.
Cool.
Right. Yeah. So for the first thing, our first thing, we're going to a little bit about how to choose what kind of laptop you're going to need, or how to figure out what you're looking for. Obviously, budget is going to be a major piece of it, and really the biggest thing is that if you have a set budget, then you can work within that budget to maximize what you can get from it. But if you're not sure what your budget should be or what you can do, there are a few things to take into consideration. I think probably the biggest one to start with is what you're going to be using it for. Like, if you're just using it for web-based stuff like Office 365 on the web or G Suite on the web, or even just like watching Netflix and streaming things on the web, that you can get away with a very, very low power machine because the processing and everything is happening mostly in the cloud. If you're going to install Office software like Outlook or Word or Excel, that takes it up another level because you need to run those things locally. If you're going to do any kind of photo editing or video editing, or even just like collecting your pictures on there, that knocks it up because there's stuff you need to do, knocks it up a level. And then the last one, probably the one that puts the biggest strain on it, is gaming. If you're going to be playing games, and even then there's a distinction between, are you going to be playing, like just simple, like otherwise mobile phone type games, or are you really looking to get into the latest AAA titles and stuff like that? So first thing is to kind of figure out, make a list of what sort of things you're gonna want to do on your laptop, and that'll help you figure out which segment, tier, bucket, tier you're going to be looking at.
And also keep in mind, we mentioned that if you want to be using like Word or Excel, you do need a slightly higher tier than just the basic. But if you can use Word and Excel online, that's also a possibility. So Office 365 comes with, an online version that aren't as robust as the big version, as the actual application. And the same for, obviously, if you use G Suite, you can use Google Docs online, and you can maybe get one of those smaller end cloud machines. So
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I think with that too, important to remember if you're buying it not just for your family, if you're buying it for, let's say, for you to use for work, check with your IT department or your IT provider too. They may have some guidelines and recommendations. They may
Right.
also have a line on budget laptops that you can get to. A lot of
Correct.
IT departments will have stuff for that. We're I think, gonna go over some retail based stuff, but I mean, for our customers, if you're looking for laptops, you can reach out to us too for business,
Absolutely.
and for everyone else, check your IT providers too. They may have good deals, and they may have requirements like, oh no, you have to get this type of
Right.
thing on it.
There's different versions of Windows maybe required to
Exactly.
operate correctly, but we don't want to go too deep into
Yeah.
that one. That's a whole
All
other
different
topic.
versions of
The whole-
Windows. Get Windows 10. Even
Yeah.
if like
Yeah.
you're buying, we
Oh,
were
yes.
going to talk. Even if you're getting like factory refurbished, you need to get Windows 10 because Windows 7 isn't
Mhm.
getting the security updates anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
We're all about security.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, speaking of security, the last piece before we go over to the different types of laptops is you should always look for making sure that has a warranty on it. And I think we're going to get into details later for that. But for, especially if you're making a investment purchase in a machine that you want to have for a while, the warranty is very important because there are some parts that fail, and there are some good warranties for laptops that'll include accidental damage. If you're using your laptop all the time, it's really easy to accidentally drop it or spill coffee on it or something along those lines. So you want to make sure that, if you're spending a good chunk of money on it, that you are keeping it protected.
Especially when so many of us are working from non-desks. Like, this is very close to my laptop right now.
Same here.
That's funny. All right, great. So let's just dive into the world of the budget laptop, because it's there. I think a lot of people see them. You see them on Amazon, you see them on Micro Center, you see them online. How we define budget laptops is $500 or less for machine. And so, one of the things that you actually keep in mind, what do you think would be a good place for you to kind of keep in mind from purchasing a budget laptop? Like, what are the specs? What do they look like?
Yeah, the first thing is you should consider this if you're in that first category where you're doing things online, mostly. You're not really installing, like the laptops we're looking at in this category, I wouldn't recommend running Outlook, full version of Outlook on, or really installing applications. The biggest factor for that is that they all come with very, very small amounts of storage and RAM. And they're similar to, if you remember the buzzword of netbooks,
Right.
maybe 10 years ago. They're pretty much the new version of that, where they're very great connecting to the internet and doing things online, but I wouldn't look to install anything on them.
Right.
They're good in a pinch.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. They fill a need. They also might be very useful for a student who who's doing very light online work. I know my kids use a different variety of Microsoft and Google applications, and all done in the browser. So that might be a great use for them, so that you're not, as Marianne said, is not made out of machines in the house. This might be a great way to kind of supplement the household machine and give them their own dedicated piece of equipment.
And we did some research, picked out two retail ones that we found. I think the first one is the HP Stream 11. Comes in at about $200, give or take. The pros of this one are it's very light. It's less than 3 pounds, about 2.5 pounds. So it's great for moving around and for carrying. Has a really good battery life because it's small. It has a small screen. The 11 it's an 11-inch display. So if you're looking to do a lot of stuff on it, you may want to hook it up to an external monitor, external keyboard, but really good for web-based stuff. The downside to these are it's only 4 gigs of RAM and a 32 gig internal storage. And that, depending on what kind of mobile phone you have, you may have more RAM and storage in a phone than that. But that being said, this is perfect to get Chrome, Firefox on, run some stuff there, do some light local applications, and everything else in cloud. So if you're in cloud all the time and you just need something to connect to the internet or something to play Netflix or music on, great for that.
Right.
The other one that we looked at is the Acer Swift One, which is about $100 more. You get double the storage in that one, so that's up to 64 gigs of storage. That actually does make a big difference, because the first one you probably won't be able to install anything. It'll run Windows, it'll run Chrome, but 64 gigs, that's enough room to put, maybe a couple of small applications on, or have some files saved locally on it.
Right.
It's a little bit heavier. It's just under 3 pounds, and it's got a 14-inch display.
Right.
Both of these, without getting too into details on it, they both use a class of processor from Intel that's very low power. So again, perfect for web, because it's not going to do a lot of CPU processing locally, but it is going to be able to get you online and not use up the battery. So these are great for for not having plugged in all the time.
I got to say this, looking at the stats here, I mean, a 14-inch display and that is probably more full-size keyboard might make it a much more usable machine.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
If you need to be typing a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. If you're going to be using it, it's definitely going to be a step up.
And 60 or double storage is a big deal, because the first one you really don't have enough room to do anything other than Windows on it and a browser. The second one, I'd say you could try installing. I wouldn't recommend running, if you're going to run an application, I wouldn't multitask at all, but you could try and install some stuff on it.
So Justin, do you think it's a bad idea to have like 30 or 40 Chrome browser windows open on that machine?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you keep saying Chrome. I'm like, Firefox?
Firefox.
If you want, Firefox tends to use a little bit less RAM or memory. So because these are 4 gigs, which is actually kind of lower than I would usually recommend. But again, these are in a pinch. These are super budget. So, so that's why we're recommending that. In general, I mean, you don't have to buy either of the ones that we are mentioning, but just look for something that's, we already mentioned, it's got to be Windows 10. Make sure that like the processor is good. You don't Google it, make sure, see what they say about that. And think about what you need. Do you need the small display and the portability, or do you need just a little bit more power? Is sort of the idea. So
also, just how many USB ports, if you have to connect it to something else, external keyboard or mouse, that sort of thing, display outputs, that sort of thing. Really just figure out what you're going to do with it. That's the most fundamental part. Like, are you okay with it, with this being less than high powered?
When you go to budget, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to, things are going to be slower. You're not going to be able to run multiple applications, maybe any, but like a lot of Chrome browsers at once. So think about that. What do you need? And plan to be a little bit patient on these ones. But that's, I mean, they're great prices.
Yeah.
It's like, think about how much my phone costs.
One of the things you'll notice there is that they're both Windows machines. There are no Mac machines within that price range.
No.
So that'll bring us to the second tier, is the mid-range, where I think we're calling between 500 and 1200 falls into mid-range. And this is where we're going to see our first Mac. The big difference with these is that we're going from those little ones, the netbooks. The hard drives are basically like little SD cards, the 32 and 64 gig ones. Here we're moving into actual hard disk size, so 128, 256 gigs, and in an SSD.
I was going to say, if you're able to afford the mid-range, one of the biggest bangs for your buck is if you can afford an SSD, which is called a solid-state drive, over an HDD. I actually hard drive disk.
Hard disk drive.
Thank you. Hard disk drive. It is actually a huge improvement on performance and also longevity. So that's like, they do tend to cost a little bit more, but if you can get into this mid-range, get an SSD. That's number one recommendation, generic recommendation on these mid-range ones.
Yeah, you can actually get away with less RAM than if you have the SSD in it, because the paging on the disk, I won't get too technical into it, but the disk is fast enough that you can it'll feel faster with less RAM.
Right.
The first one that we've got on our list that we pulled up was the HP Envy 13T. This one has a 256 gig SSD, so this is enough room to start installing applications. If you're looking to
Right.
have like, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook installed, Marianne's new dog.
It's live.
You can. This is where you're going to start with. This one price we found is at about $750. The downside on this one is the RAM. It's only got 4 gigs, which is not a lot. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend real multitasking on this.
Right.
But with the SSD drive, it is going to feel faster, even with that reduced amount of RAM.
Right.
There's also a different class of processor on these. This one is using a Core i7. I don't have the generation number on it, so one of the ways you can tell with Intel processors, anyway, how fast they are is they're broken down into i3, i5, i7, i9, and then a number. And the first part of that number is the generation. The current ones are 10. So if you see like an i5 8500, that's relatively new. That's a 8th generation versus 10th. If you see an i5, 3 something, 3550, that's an older processor, so you
Right.
may want to check before you purchase
Yeah.
that. But
And
i7s tend to be good, powerful processors,
Yeah.
and this one I would say there's enough space and enough storage on to be able to install software on.
right.
I was going to say from one of the more geek to English translator, usually when I'm looking at Intel processors, even like you do want to see more of the latest versions, but they do still have some that don't have the i3, i5, or i7. So to me, I'm like, at least get the i3, i5, or i7. Don't get one of the ones that's like Core Duo anymore. Like those are
Yeah.
not quite what you need. So
Yeah,
that's
those are
my advice.
those are mostly geared for power saving as opposed to performance. So if you're looking for those little netbooks where they really sit battery, they're meant to just run for hours, they'll have that. But these are more geared towards actually running software.
Yeah, and these mid-range laptops are actually pretty good. You're not necessarily going to feel like you're sacrificing too much. A little bit maybe with the webcam and the display. You probably aren't going to get 1080p, but in general, when you're going in this mid-range, it's not going to be painful to be using this laptop.
Right. And then we get to our first Mac on the list here,
Yeah.
which is the MacBook Pro 13 at the kind of the bottom end of the MacBook range. But it is a pretty nice machine for the money. It's a great display, great camera, Mac OS, obviously. That doesn't have the newer keyboard model, so it has that kind of like butterfly keyboard that people tend to really dislike.
Yeah.
I don't really use a MacBook. I haven't used them, so I don't have an opinion either way. But I've heard, I know certain people in Valiant have a real dislike for it. His name is Gene.
Yeah.
but it makes sense though, because I think the old MacBook keyboard is one of the greatest keyboards ever made. But they've gone back to that in the newer versions, and
they will be.
But they've improved it since the original backlash of the new keyboard. So they've definitely
updated it, so it's not as bad. But if you're holding out for the old keyboard coming back, that'll come later. The benefits to this one is Core i5 processor, which is also a newer generation because Apple refreshes every year stuff that they're offering pretty much. So it's a very nice processor. 8 gigs of RAM, which is enough to be able to do some good multitasking. Only 128 gigs storage. So if you are looking to do things like store photos, definitely leverage cloud services. And with Apple, that'd be iCloud, things like that, to free up your disk space, to keep your disk space for things that you're using locally or for applications. If you are, I'd say if you have iPhone, iPad stuff at home, I would go Apple to kind of keep everything in the family. It's usually what I tell people when they ask which one I should get is, well, what kind of phone do you have? Let's start there.
Yeah,
And
great point.
and what you want to do with it. I mean, for the most part, the like the Office software is pretty good on Mac nowadays. Outlook is the only one that I think is still better on Windows, but it's come a long way. So
Yeah.
the only catch with again, check with your IT department, make sure that they don't have any requirements that don't work on it. If they're a PC shop and like, oh, you have to have a PC to use XYZ, check that out. But otherwise, it's a great way to get a really powerful machine.
So, yeah, and a 13-inch MacBook Pro for under $1,200 is great.
So, and we have a great comment here. I might mangle some names here. Yes, here's Suisi. From my experience, those are good to mid-range laptops, as is VivoBook 15, Dell Xps 13, Microsoft Surface Book 2. And I absolutely agree with those. The Dell XPS 13 and the Surface Book 2 at the lower end 13-inch size one is a great machine. I use that myself. I think it's for the money. It's and I think Microsoft did a great job with the keyboard on that one. Probably one of the best keyboards I've ever seen on any of the computer here. And so it's a pretty good setup, and I agree with that. And the XPSs, we have sold a number of those over the years to different clients or people use them.
I'm using one right now.
Yeah, Mary Ann has one right now.
I'm on a Surface as well. I love my Surface Book. It works really well. And for our customers, we're a Dell partner, so we sell a lot of Dell laptops that run through those. They're very, very good as well. And really, it's the manufacturer, I find, is not as, especially in the budget range, is not as critical as the components that are in it. You want to make sure that you meet the spec. If you're looking at two that are exactly the same and priced the same, then you can go by brands. But otherwise, I like to go by what's in them. But yeah, those are
right. So we have one more comment from the peanut gallery or from our audience. I love more comments, the better. We love it. We love answering questions. So Stefan, who always asks great ones, he's in Apple House and older MacBooks, and can they be upgraded and still be set up these days? You have to check. A lot of it has to do with the version of macOS it can run. There's some great resources we'll throw up on the stream. Maybe we'll find them later. That says, "Can I run this OS?" I did it the other day. I have some older MacBooks at home, and unfortunately, they can't run the newest version of macOS.
Apple does put restrictions on what version of the operating system can run on which hardware because they want to basically they curate the experience for what you're going to get. So if they say that like this operating system just isn't going to work on this hardware, instead of letting you do it and have a bad experience, they say no, you can't. So depending on, but with that in mind, even if you have an older operating system for those machines, and if it can't run the latest software or you can still use them like the lower end Netflix ones where you're loading in a browser and doing stuff online with them. As long as it's able to do that and is still getting security updates, there's no reason to get rid of them. If you have them, you can make use of them.
Especially with the Mac, which is a pretty decent screen and webcam.
Yeah,
using it for that functionality, I think that's pretty all right in my opinion. So, all right. So, are we ready to move on to our high-end laptop segment? So, there's some cool ones out there. So, let's just rip through it.
All right. So, yeah, we're looking at these are coming in over $1,200. And so we didn't go into, there are some really I'm gonna say crazy laptops that you can put together for like gaming laptops and mobile workstations. For a client, we built systems with Dell that had a full graphics card in it and an external power supply to run it. And it was we're not necessarily looking at those, but if you've got budget to burn and you just want the best of the best, those are out there. What we're looking at are more the bigger amounts of RAM, bigger storage, bigger screen is going to drive it. So the first that we are looking at here is Dell XPS 13. That one's coming in at about $1,200 on the nose there. You can get them with an i5 or an i7. The real difference between them is going to be how many cores, how many threads it can run, and these are technical, so we won't get too deep into them, but it's how much processing how many things it can process at one time. and I think it's starting at 16 gigs of RAM, which is really good for
Yeah.
multitasking. 512 gig SSD, which is a good amount of storage. Again, if you're going to be doing a lot of video or storing lots of photos, I'd leverage cloud services to help offload that. But that's enough to dump a whole card of photos onto it, process it, and then save up to the cloud.
Sync your SharePoint or
Yeah.
Also, I think a great use of that would be like, let's say if you're using it for as a business machine where you want to have your VoIP application running, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, bunch of windows open. You can really dive deep. You can have your line of business applications all loaded, be it browser or otherwise.
If you want to stream to Facebook and YouTube,
you can use it for that too. I've heard. And so that's a great machine for that money.
To give a little context as well, since I've been working, remote with my laptop here has 8 gigs of RAM, and when we're doing these streams, I shut everything else down. But during the day, I've got Outlook, I've got Teams, I've got Chrome, I've got Word all open and running, and 16 gigs is going to be better for that kind of work. It'll work with that. The next one on the list is our second.
Well, before we move to the second Mac, I do want to say so we've been talking a lot about Dell XPS 13. And that the 13 is the screen size. So if you need a slightly bigger screen, just go up to the next size. It's going to be a little bit more, but since we're in the upper range, that'll be included in this one as well. So think about your own display as well if you need to be seeing a lot. But again, if you're setting up a home office, we also do recommend an external monitor.
Definitely.
But just keep in mind the adapters if you're doing that. We have blog posts on that as well. So another time for that information.
Absolutely. And so our last one is a brand new MacBook 16, which kind of replaced the old MacBook 17s, which were out in the old days, but now it's a 16 and a little more compacted. But it's a great machine. It's a Core i9, 32 gigs of RAM, 512 SD. This is a really heavy-hitting machine that you can use for video editing. You can use it for whatever. Listen, you throw at it, it'll do it. But that being said, it's 4.5 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but after a day of carrying that thing around, you're going to be like, man, that thing is heavy. It's 4.5 pounds for the machine, another pound or so for the power supply, because that's a larger one. It's probably 90 watt. It's definitely not for a faint of heart to kind of carry and use. But that being said, I think the term they used to use is desktop replacement.
Yeah, definitely, and it's also not for the faint of heart for budget.
No,
at about $22.50. So, it is. You do pay an Apple Premium to get the Apple devices, but if you like using Apple's software, it's worth it, and it's a very good machine. For me personally, I like PCs. I would look for similar specs in a PC and see what kind of price you can get for it. But if you're looking for simple and something you can get just out of the box to run, that's a great option.
Yep, it's a great machine for them. It's even once again all about use case. That's the most important. I guess the overarching I think it's the use case using it.
And again, talk to your IT department, because we said if you're all if your applications can only run on Windows for some, think about that. But also if you guys are all a Mac shop and there's reason for doing Mac, that might be a factor as well.
So I think we mentioned at the top to always look at the warranty when you're getting a machine. I think we should talk a little bit more about that, why it's important to get a warranty with it. For Apple, it's very easy. When you go to buy it on the site, they have Apple Care is the option. You can get a 3-year with it. You have to do it when you buy the machine for the product from Apple. You can't add it after the fact. So very important, if you're purchasing from Apple, make sure that you choose Apple Care when you're doing it. For other manufacturers, it varies. Sometimes you can add it afterwards after you've purchased it for like a reinstatement fee or things like that. So check with each one when you're doing it. The reason to have a warranty on laptops is, especially if you're going to be spending over $2,000 on it, is that if you, and make sure you get one that covers it, but if you drop it, if you spill something on it, if you even if it's got parts in it that don't stop working, if it's got a fan and the fan stops working and it overheats, things
Are
like
you
that.
just specifically talking about all my laptops in college? Because
Yes.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also different types of warranties as well. So it's important to actually look at the different types, because you might think, oh, I'll just get the minimum for the longest amount. But if it doesn't cover accidental damage, like there are some that'll just be like only if it's something didn't work there. But if I spill something on it, and laptops, they're mobile, they are easily dropped. They're on the same surface as my tea. So,
and the other two things that are important to look at that vary and vary manufacturer to manufacturer are whether or not it includes the battery, which sometimes is an additional warranty, and the battery, depending on how you're using it, can after a few years stop holding a charge. And I don't know about you guys, but I have laptops that only work when they're plugged in, and I set them up for that. But if it's something that you're planning on using for years to come, you want to make sure that you have something that covers the battery. And the second one is whether or not they are going to send somebody to fix it, or if you have to send it to them. If it's a machine that you use all the time, every day, and there's something that's broken with it, but it's not stopping it from working, you may be hesitant to send it away and not have a computer for a week or two while they fix it. Whereas if the warranty is somebody's going to come and repair it, that they may come the next day and take care of it, and you have it right away. So those are things to look at as well.
That turnaround time can be significant, because if you think about your primary equipment, especially now with people, if this might be your primary home office machine or what you're working on fully, that could be devastating, like loss of productivity, and then you're trying to scramble, that sort of thing. Once again, it's important to talk to your team, your IT team, or the provider, go from there. So with that, I think Marion touched on setting up ergonomics. There is ways that we had a little bit about ports and setups before, about setting up your home office and desks and keyboards and mice and that sort of thing. We're gonna go. Please watch the stream, and also we might go back to that one again, because ergonomics is an important piece of the equation. So I think Justin, Marion, I'm gonna wrap it up. I think we got a lot of information. There's a lot for half an hour. It doesn't even seem like a half an hour. And so, a lot of it is, think back in the old days, laptop was this big giant thing, carried keyboards that fly out, all sorts of things happen.
Like there's a handle on it.
Exactly. So, and now, I don't go anywhere with my laptop. It's really part of like our work. And so there's a lot of options out there, a lot of thought, put some thought, a little bit of research, read some reviews, see what you think. And I think that there's a laptop out there for everybody, so that they keep them productive and safe and working. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We really like doing this. Thank you, and both of you, and our audience as well. We really like you guys watching this stuff. I hope you're getting use out of it. If you have ideas, please shoot them to us. We'd love to do them. And we're doing a little heavier session next time, a little more IT security, which is, as I said, Marianne said, it's super part of our day-to-day, is maintaining your privacy online. It's a really critical piece right now. A lot of information floating around. People submitting a lot of things on websites. So we'll be really thoughtful of where we put things, who we're talking to, and just keep ourselves safe out there. So with that, I'll say thank you, everyone, and I really appreciate it. All right. Bye now.
Everybody.
See you guys.
See you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.